Hello viewers and welcome to World of Business, your weekly guide as well as offering to all the trending business news as well as latest developments on the stock market. We also herald the unsung but thriving business entrepreneurs in this program. Now this is World of Business, this week's episode, and my name is Curtly Gwindi. On this particular episode we are going to be discussing the effectiveness of RBZ's strategic funding injection in addressing liquidity concerns, as well as issues around the September impact of the ZiG stability. Also touching much to do with its impact with regards to venture capital, as well as amidst ongoing inflationary pressures in the parallel market. We will also take a preview of the expected 2025 budget rollout. Now in studio today I am joined by an economist of note, no stranger to your screens, as well as here on World of Business, Mr. Kambasha. Tino, such a pleasure to be having you once again.
Thank you for having me, Curtly, and welcome to the Zimbabweans.
Absolutely. Zimbabwe is watching and obviously wanting to track issues around this particular matter that has to do with not just the stability of the ZiG, but perhaps let's talk about the access to venture capital in Zimbabwe. Now, you come in representation of all these matters and more with regards to the stock market. Briefly tell us what venture capital is all about.
Well, basically, it's a form of private equity investment. And we've seen quite a lot of companies in the world that have benefited from venture capital, some big ones, your usual, your Facebooks and so forth, even Tesla to some extent. So basically, it's when you get investors who come together, crowd in, and look at startup companies or maybe idea and innovative type of companies that wouldn't necessarily got funding from your traditional banking. And they come in as an equity partner usually, and they grow with the business rather than an actual loan that usually banks then give out. So
Okay.
that's more or less just the difference.
Absolutely. We'll be looking at that relationship and more with regards to the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe itself. Crowdfunding, can you also liken it to venture capital?
Yeah, in a sense, but crowdfunding is not an active role. So us as the venture capital company of Zimbabwe, we play an active role. We are actually partnering up with the investees rather than just raising funds and walking away.
Shares
we
as
are taking shares.
And having a position. Now, we speak of Smedco, we speak of Women's Bank, Empower Bank, with a rich history of also giving access to different people of different demographics, different backgrounds and business plans. How does the venture capital company of Zimbabwe separate itself from these?
So we're here to complement a lot of these institutions. So let me take you a step back. Our mandate is completely different to the three other sister companies that are also under state-owned enterprises.
Yes.
So you've noticed that the president has gone out and rolled out all these innovation hubs at the universities.
Oh, yes.
And have come up with some brilliant ideas and some brilliant kids who've come up with new inventions and startups. The problem that we had was there's now a big gap between the ideas and commercialization of those ideas. So that's where we come up. We partner up with all these great ideas and we help them grow into commercial businesses. So we've got quite a few lined up. I mean, we've only been operational for about 3 months.
Yeah.
I know we were set up in 2021, but there wasn't a full management or a team on the ground. We now have that in place. So I think 2025, the end of NDS 1 into NDS 2, we're going to see that part of the economy grow quite significantly.
And the significant growth is obviously something that we want to track, and bringing you to World of Business, obviously we need to also introspect and interrogate the relationship between our main governing body with regards to finance in Zimbabwe, being the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, and the venture capital company. How is there a symbiotic relationship that has come from these two entities?
Well, I think everybody's related to the RVZ.
Yeah, in one way or
in one way or another.
Yeah.
I think for us, it's more to understand what the future of the monetary policy is going to look like. And that way, when we do make our investments into our investee companies, we also look at the monetary effect of that. So from our end, we are hoping that if we grow these businesses to the size that we are hoping to, we will end up being net exporters for some of the products. So if we export more, that means more foreign currency is coming into the country. So therefore also helping the RBZ in stabilizing the currency through excess foreign currency and liquidity coming in. So that's the role that we want to play amongst other stuff, other industries. Industry and commerce, we want to play a big part in that. We want to play a big part in agriculture as well. And hoping that we get that export side of things to prop up our currency.
Absolutely. Propping up our currency, speaking all things to do with excess liquidity. Now, as we introduced the program, we obviously hinted a little bit on the inflationary pressures that are also coming. Typically, we do know that you speak more of the USD and not the ZWG language. But let's just delve into this for a moment. You know, there are several factors that have perhaps led to the recent currency adjustments that speak highly to, you know, the parallel market, things going up and down, the black market itself. What can you say are the factors that have contributed to the excess liquidity that is happening in Zimbabwe's economy?
Well, I think the ZWG needs to find itself and its home and its sweet spot. We're hoping that the adjustments that happened last month are going to help it get to that sweet spot.
What are these adjustments?
Well, we devalued the ZWG. I think it was from about 14 to about 25. And we've seen it slowly, you know, stabilize around those levels. And that is also due to the capital injection that was done by the RBZ in US dollars to back it up. So the main problem is that we've got an excess supply of US dollars, some of it rightfully so, some of it not. So if we're getting a demand of US dollars from non-productive sectors or non-exporting sectors, then that really distorts that demand for the US dollars. If you look at other countries, if you look at South Africa, how many times have you gone into Pick and Pay and purchased with US dollars?
Yeah, that's
you haven't.
It's quite interesting you said
that.
Yeah,
you haven't. So that's because you have no use for US dollars in Pick and Pay.
Absolutely.
Right? Whereas here, it's a different story. So hopefully if we stabilize, we're going to get to that sweet spot where the ZWG will then be that number one currency of trade. But it first needs to get to the sweet spot. That's the balance of demand and supply. And the other major issue we have in this country is the distortion of demand on the currency. A few people sitting in a couple of offices decide, look, let's increase the rate.
Absolutely.
And the rate goes. So some of it, a lot of it is indiscipline from actual market players.
And the key members of society who perhaps drive the narrative of the currency. Perhaps let's talk about the idea of the efforts that the RBZ has put in to inject foreign currency into the market. And naturally demand for the hard currency then continues to rise. But naturally, once again, the increased demand and the idea that there's affection between both the formal and informal market, it then fluctuates. So what then now then becomes the answer with regards to the idea behind the market itself with its demand for hard currency vis-a-vis its availability?
Again, I'll go back to my point. The demand, is it actual demand or is it perceived demand? I think we really need to unpack that. And the major problem, and like you mentioned, the formal and informal. So we need to formalize as much of the informal as we can, whether it's through transactional gadgets, whether we go more electronic, maybe as a country, to push more for the electronic environment, maybe of the US dollar itself. Maybe we need to be talking to our mobile companies to start including more people and giving incentives to people in Barem Sika and so forth, and taxi drivers and so forth to use
the mobile currencies.
And then that way we're capturing the informal sector and bringing them into the formal sector. And then that way we can account and then find our sweet spot to see where exactly should the zig be. But right now we've got too much happening outside the formal system. We can't regulate it. We don't know what's happening. We can't manage the velocity of cash that's in informal sectors. So, you know, we've got issues not only just from like Barem seeker, you've got the artisanal miners, you've got people smuggling things out of this country. We can't account for that money. So we need to find a way to include everyone more into the system.
And its circulation once again.
Yeah.
So inclusion being a very important part, because we do know SMEs do play a huge role. Yeah. And most rightly, we also do play a huge role with regards to bringing about the conversation, everything to do with the stability of the currency. We are also tracking issues to do with venture capital here on A World of Business. Now, please do join us once again in the second segment. We are taking a short break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Thank you for staying with us here on World of Business, your program that tracks everything to do with the trending business stories, as well as keeping you updated on the latest developments with regards to the stock market. Now, my name is Curtly Gwindi. I am joined once again by economic analyst Kambasha. Tino, we were talking earlier on about the idea around the circulation of the currency itself being the ZWG, but let's delve into the idea on the sidelines now to do with the Parliament's pre-budget seminar that was held in Bulawayo last week. Now, our Honourable Minister of Finance, Professor Ncube, said the 2025 national budget will take into consideration the needs of the vulnerable groups in society. Now, how important does that idea play with regards to the inclusion of such groups in the budget?
I'm glad you actually mentioned that. Our Parliament Portfolio Committee has done some outstanding work, chaired by Honourable Chidua, and they have really gone out and spoken to the people. Actually, we've increased on our ranking of consultation and consulting people when it comes to budget. So Zim is quite highly ranked, especially in Southern Africa. So basically what that does is to understand where the mandate comes from. So the mandate, so before we look at treasury and our expenditure and we go to our budget and see how much we're spending on health, how much we're spending on agriculture, we need to talk to the people who have given the government the mandate. Oh, yeah. So consulting them, especially on a using devolution structure, and talking to the marginalized, the women, the youth, the disabled, and bringing everyone into the discussion, then gives us a holistic 360 view of what the budget should look like. So given the way that it has been handled, I'm sure we're going to see quite an interesting budget for next year.
Oh yes, definitely, definitely. And perhaps the NDS2, the role that the VCC is playing, briefly touch on that. Give us, we were talking earlier on speaking as a quasi-parastatal, but at the same time, we also want to appreciate its space within the community. How important is the contribution of the venture capital company with regards to national development strategy too?
100%. So first we need to get going and set up and finish off NDS1 and the pillars that were set up in NDS1. So for NDS2 is going to be more of an accelerated growth, especially in the industry and commerce. So what we are trying to do is to first find what the problem is and then go back to the tertiary institutions and ask them to fix the problem. I think the issue that we've had in the past is that we've got all these great ideas coming up, but really not solving specific problems. So you'll see with even a couple of, quite excited about some of the projects that are coming out towards the end of this year, where they're actually fixing issues like I'd mentioned to you when we were offline. That there's one project where we are completely going to change the way tomatoes go to market.
Oh, yeah.
Dehydrating them and turning them into a powder that lasts for 18 months. So that's going to change the whole tomato game in the country and maybe even in the region if we grow that well. So it's moving those ideas to assist with industrialization and the growth of the nation and the growth of exports.
Okay.
So I think that's the role that we're going to play in accelerating those ideas for them so that they can become commercial sooner.
Okay, that's good. And I think the inclusion of different markets from the small to medium, from the formal to informal, also sets you apart as the VCC. And lastly, in finality, as we close up the conversation, perhaps we await the rolling out of the 2025 national budget. Very importantly, what recommendations are going to come from the VCC? I know you're just starting up. We're talking 3 months. We're not talking too much of a long-term, probably way to assess. But obviously, there are recommendations. There are submissions you can make. Perhaps here on World of Business, we'd like to hear them first.
Well, we've made our submissions to the ministry already.
All right.
But I think talking from a bigger picture from a macro point of view, not just from the VCC point, we would like to see maybe hopefully more focus on value addition in terms of agriculture and minerals. I think those are easy wins. And accelerated value addition, and we're hoping to play our part in that sector. We've already started with the agricultural side and also in ICT to see how much growth we can get and to get service-centered jobs and delivery from that. So I think those 3 sectors, ICT, mining, agriculture, with innovation, accelerated growth, I hope we see quite a bit of focus in those areas.
Perfect. Sounds great. Yep. And Tino, it's always a pleasure having you here on World of Business.
Thanks for having me.
Excellent times. And of course, you will be joining us for our very next session of course, breaking down these issues and more. We have been joined by Tino Kambasha here on your exclusive program, World of Business, coming to you weekly with all things to do with the economy and more. Now, my name is Curtly Gwindi. Stay tuned for the third and final segment. Welcome to the third and final segment of World of Business. Now, this week, World of Business team spoke to Mrs. Moyo Nyamakanga, a local entrepreneur majoring in rabbit farming. Now, we're going to hear more from our on-site reporter here on World of Business, none other than Sela Marere. Over to you, Sela.
In line with Zimbabwe's rural industrialization agenda, rabbit farming has emerged from the woods and may offer vast opportunities in economic empowerment, rural development and food security. Against this background, the World of Business team has visited a local entrepreneur with an enterprise in rabbit farming. We're going to speak to Mrs. Moyo Nyamakanga, wife to the president of the Zimbabwe Commercial Rabbit Breeders Association, Mr. Regis Nyamakanga. She's going to walk us through their journey as entrepreneurs in rabbit farming. What are the challenges that they have faced? What are the opportunities that are presented by this particular enterprise? Stay tuned for this insightful conversation. Can you walk us through your journey to becoming rabbit farmers and ultimately rabbit meat producers in Zimbabwe?
Thank you so much, Sela. Our rabbit journey started a few years ago. We saw an opportunity for the local market in the rabbit industry because, as you might know, the rabbit industry globally is a $7 billion industry. So we decided to tap into that market by first raising rabbits. So we started by raising rabbits in Zimbabwe at our rabbit tree in Waterfalls, which has 5,000 purebred rabbit breeders. So we then decided to go up the value chain where we started, where we established an abattoir. So our abattoir is based in Waterfalls, Harare, where we have a slaughtering capacity of 3,500 rabbits in an 8-hour shift.
Okay. So you mentioned that you started off by raising the rabbits themselves and ultimately establishing an abattoir. Can you walk us through the entire value chain from where we start off up until the end to the end user, I mean the consumer of the rabbit meat?
Sure, we're running with a farm-to-table concept where we raise rabbits, then we get them slaughtered at our abattoir. We then went further to establish a rabbit grill where we also cook rabbit dishes. Then from there, we also decided to value-add rabbit meat products. So from the rabbit meat, we are now making rabbit polony, rabbit sausages. We're also doing rabbit biltong, rabbit burgers, rabbit pies, and sausage rolls. So we are still working on more value-added products as a way of enriching the local rabbit industry.
How lucrative is this market internationally and locally, and are there any particular high-yielding species that provide for better returns as compared to others?
The consumers would and farmers would want to know, and potential farmers alike, is that there are different types of rabbit breeds, and in our rabbitry currently we have the New Zealand whites, the Chinchilla giganta. We also have the American sable, the New Zealand red, the New Zealand black. Those are all varieties which have got different characteristics, and we also do have the California breed.
So you spoke of the Chinese market forming the biggest market consuming rabbit meat with a demand of about 1 million tons against a supply of just 600,000 tons, meaning there is that 400,000 ton deficit. How are you taking advantage of this gap? Looking at your project and also looking at Zimbabwe, are we exporting rabbit meat to the Chinese?
We are not exporting currently, but we are trying to raise our production levels for us to be able to export. We started off by distributing purebred rabbits throughout the country to all the 10 provinces. So we are working on what we call a rotational scheme, where we give purebred rabbits to a farmer, they breed, and when they breed, they give the parent stock to the next farmer. So there are quite a number of areas that are doing very well in that regard. If you look at Manicaland, I think they're in their fifth round of rotations at the moment. And other areas such as Mashingo, Bulawayo, Harare, they're also doing well. There are some farmers who are doing very well in those areas. So we are looking at growing the local market. And being the only abattoir in Zimbabwe, we are also buying rabbits from local producers. So if a farmer has their rabbits, we book them at our abattoir if they want to sell them, and we also purchase from them. But however, they have to deliver healthy rabbits to us. We only buy healthy rabbits.
Okay.
Yes.
What challenges have you faced, and how have you managed, or how are you dealing with this?
I'll speak about the rabbit industry as a whole. There are challenges in terms of prices of feed, the cost of starting up, because a simple cage will cost you about $400 for a 20 compartment. So we still have challenges in terms of pricing of our inputs. So at the moment, this is why we are also growing the sector by donating some of our pure breed rabbits so that we can have a wider pool of farmers who are raising rabbits. Some farmers were telling us of some of the diseases that they are getting, like your snuffles, which hit quite a few rabbitries in the last few weeks, and there are also weather-related diseases such as your heat stroke. So those are some of the challenges that farmers can face as they raise rabbits.
Okay. So speaking of these challenges, mainly looking at the outbreak of diseases, what biosecurity measures should be put in place by the government and also the rabbit farmers themselves in order to shield the vulnerable stock from intensified health risks? For example, you spoke of the heat wave.
Okay, when it comes to the heat wave, because of climate change, that's not something that we can change naturally. So we advise farmers to ensure that their rabbitries are maintained in a cool form. I think as you were going around, you saw one of our employees watering, we call it watering the cages. You don't, of course, pour so much water on rabbits, otherwise they'll die. But just to make sure that they receive a bit of cool temperature, and you can even put ice blocks in your rabbitries to ensure that the temperatures remain cool, because if the heat is excessive, they could die. Then in terms of other biosecurity measures, one is to ensure that whoever goes in and out of their rabbitries at least has to pass through some form of biosecurity. You have to disinfect, ensure that someone is not coming from an area which is disease prone, and they don't carry rabbits into your rabbitry. Otherwise, if their rabbit is infected, it can infect the whole lot.
So earlier this year, I think around March, you collaborated with the Chinese embassy in training about 204 rabbit farmers from all over the country. What are you doing to improve livelihoods and also to ensure food security in Zimbabwe?
We are imparting skills to as many farmers as we can, and the partnership with the Chinese embassy came as a welcome development because we were able to reach to more areas than we would have as an entity on our own. So far many farmers have been trained, and we can see that the uptake of rabbit farming has been on the increase, which bodes well for an industry which we are trying to grow. So we also, in addition to that, like I mentioned earlier, gave out some purebred rabbits to all the 10 provinces in Zimbabwe. And we have farmers who are already on a rabbit pass-on scheme where we allow them to breed rabbits, and when they kindle and give birth, they then pass on the parent stock to the next farmer. So with that, we are also having collaborations amongst rabbit farmers in the communities.
Okay, so apart from that, what are the other benefits that are associated with rabbit farming?
Rabbit farming as an industry has the potential to employ quite a number of people. So in terms of job creation, we are seeing that most people are venturing into rabbit farming to create jobs. And we are improving livelihoods in many communities as a result of rabbit farming. As a healthy white meat, it's good for people with diabetes. So we hear from a scientific perspective, for those with blood pressure and many other health concerns, it's got a low fat content and high in protein. It's actually one of the best when it comes to white meat.
Lastly, your words of motivation and inspiration to aspiring rabbit farmers that are watching you.
Encourage many people to venture into rabbit farming because there's a lot of opportunity in this industry. We're currently even failing to meet the local demand, and we are even also talking of exports. So we need to build our pool of local rabbit meat. So I would encourage many rabbit farmers to venture into rabbit farming. The sky is the limit for the industry.
Definitely, the sky is the limit. Thank you so much, Mrs. Nyamakanga. Sky is indeed the limit. Those are the words of Mrs. Nyamakanga, who has taught us how to handle this particular enterprise, the pros and cons, the advantages that are associated with venturing into this particular market. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's segment of our Entrepreneur of the Week. Be sure to join us again on our next segment. It's now back to the studio.
And that was the final segment of this week's World of Business. Now, my name is Curtly Gwindi. I have been your host today. It's a pleasant viewing, and God bless Zimbabwe.